Okay, so in the last part we laid down a basic kick and snare layout with a few layers. Now we're going to add a bit more life to it with some hi-hats and some cymbals. So again, straight to the drum library, search for hi-hat. In fact, I'm just going to search for hat because that hasn't come up with much. So I'm just skip through. I want kind of a live sounding closed hat, so that sounds pretty good to me. So what I'm going to do is just drag that on. I'm going to start with a very, very basic, just basically going on 16ths. So, well, 16ths or 8ths, depending on what BPM you think you're at, because this is kind of half time 150. So technically it's 8 notes, but so that's just going to be really simple, like think of it like a rock beat almost. It's just, it keeps it steady, like it keeps the groove going along. So I'm also, that's the very basics of that. I'm also going to have a open hat in there somewhere to just kind of, so it's not just completely static the whole time. So on the last offbeat here, I'm going to get it so it goes which is just a nice, again, it adds a liveness to it, even though it's it's clearly not live programmed. It adds a little bit more movement to it. So again, search for hat. I'm going to search for open, and I think one of those two. Let's go with B for no reason at all. So now it's going to go like this. Actually, I've put that in the wrong place. There we go. Yeah, so there we go. Like, it's, again, that's super simple, and I know it's probably not sounding that great yet, but that's like, it sounds simple and effective at the moment. And then once we go into processing things like that, it's all going to start to come alive a little bit more. So I'm going to name that hi-hat. And so in terms of like laying out the drums, it's really worth thinking of it as an actual drum kit. So imagine that someone's actually playing these drums. It's going to help a lot if you actually play drums, but if you don't worry, like you can still get the hang of this. What you've got to think of is, like, a drummer only has a certain number of hands. So when a drummer's playing a hi-hat and a snare, he can't also be playing a cymbal or a tom or anything like that. So what it helps to do is kind of, if you've got a crash when this hi-hat's playing, we'll maybe mute the hi-hat, because it's going to immediately cause less, you're going to have less kind of conflicts, and it's just going to sound more natural. It's almost like a subconscious thing, but it'll sound more natural to people. So what I'm going to do is, so the way our tunes normally drop, you have like something kind of like a bass hit, or something on that first hit there, and then it kind of starts after the first snare. So I'm going to mute those first two. You're going to get a hi-hat there, and then this kick, that's where it all kind of normally kicks off for us. I'm just going on the way we normally write stuff, and again, like I say, it's worth just doing something that you know is going to work, even if you do end up tweaking it later. So what I'm going to add now is a crash cymbal on that kick there, because that's where probably where the 808 is going to come in, and where everything just gets loud and exciting. So what I'm also going to do is I'm going to color that yellow, because yellow is the color of hi-hats apparently. I can't tell you why, that's just the way it is. So add another audio track, also yellow. So this is going to be a crash cymbal. So I'm just going to search for crash. Sounds pretty good. Let's just chuck that in there. So it's nice and loud. And then you hear where that kick is there. like we tend to just emphasize the sort of later kicks. I don't know why, it's just that's what we end up doing. So I'm just going to do this now because I know that that's probably what's going to end up happening in the track. So what I might do is actually find a different crash, because you know on the drum kit you've got like 3 cymbals. You've got 2 crashes and a ride cymbal. So it does work to have, so that's kind of a different pitch. So I'm just going to chuck that in on, yeah, there. So, in fact, I'm going to put that on a separate track as well. And I'm going to copy the, you know, the kick goes da-dum. There we go. So I'm going to do that. So it's kind of got, it's starting to have a bit of life now. It's starting to sound like there's almost like a drum riff happening. Like it's like a hook on just on the drums. And that means that like you're gonna, like when you start to add other sounds in, you've already got kind of an idea of what rhythm they might be, what might sound good, what might not. So it just helps later down the line if you can start from a good place with your drums. So that's kind of a pretty good starting point for your drums, really. We're probably, I think what we might add just at the end here, I'm just going to add, just to kind of round off the hook, I'm just going to add a little tom fill. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to load a drum kit. So again, the Ableton library is great, and it has kind of some nice actual preset kits. So go into drums, and then you've got all these kits here. So, and they give you a nice little preview. So this one I know, can you hear that's like a rock kit basically, you can spot it a mile off. So I know that that one's got some pretty decent toms in it. So there you go. So what I'm just going to do, it's just going to be a super simple tom fill. It's just going to go like that, like super simple. So I'm just going to go, and what's great about it is it gives you the names of the drums as well, so you know exactly what you're after. So I'm just going to, on this beat, just going to do that. So let's go high, mid, what am I doing here? Let me loop that. And then low. Okay, so we're, again, once we process these, we're going to make that sound a lot better. But already, you've got a pretty strong drum groove here. So it sounds live. It's got life to it. It's got movement, and that's really, like, you know, it's really important. Like, the drums are the foundation of your track. Like, they're always going to be one of the most noticeable things in the track. They're always going to be right at the front of the track. So it's worth making them sound alive and interesting, and, you know, spending the time on doing little drum fills and things that add excitement at the end of bars and things like that. But I mean, that to me is a pretty good starting point for a drum groove, you know. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go back into each of these parts and just do a bit of processing to kind of give them more character, more tone. You know, the snare needs to poke through a bit more. It needs to have a bit more body. So we're just going to go through and do all of those things in the next part. So I'll see you there.
If you like this course, why not head over to sonicacademy.com, where we have hundreds of complete track builds in every genre imaginable, including all the project files and samples. You'll also find tutorials on plugins and synths, mixing and mastering, over 250 tech tips, artist interviews, along with our award-winning plugins, samples and preset packs.